organization and functioning of the executive and the judiciary, ministries and departments of the government, pressure groups and informal associations and their role in the polity.
1. HC rejects SEC order restraining minister. Andhra Pradesh State Election Commissioner had ordered that Panchayat Raj and Rural Development Minister Pedareddy Ramachandra Reddy be confined to his residence till February 21 to prevent him from vitiating the process of Gram Panchayat elections. However, this order has been struck down by the High Court. The minister has argued in the court that the impugned action was beyond the jurisdiction of the SEC and in violation of Articles 14 and 21 of the Constitution. Powers of the State Election Commissioner in this regard. The SEC, in its order, said it was invoking its plenary powers under Article 243 Kelvins of the Constitution and directing the DGP to confine the minister to his residential premises until the completion of the local per Gram Panchayat elections. About the State Election Commission. The Constitution of India vests in the State Election Commission, consisting of a State Election Commissioner, the superintendence, direction and control of the preparation of electoral rolls for, and the conduct of all elections to the panchayats and the municipalities. The State Election Commissioner is appointed by the Governor. As per Article 243, the Governor, when so requested by the State Election Commission, make available to the State Election Commission such staff as may be necessary for the discharge of the functions conferred on the SEC. The AC and SECs have a similar mandate. Do they also have similar powers? The provisions of Article 243 Kelvins of the Constitution, which provides for setting up of SECs, are almost identical to those of Article 324 related to the AK. In other words, the SECs enjoy the same status as the AK. In Kishan Singh Tomar vs. Municipal Corporation of the City of Ahmedabad case, the Supreme Court directed that state governments should abide by orders of the SECs during the conduct of the panchayat and municipal elections. Just like they follow the instructions of the AK during assembly and parliament polls. How far can courts intervene? Courts cannot interfere in the conduct of polls to local bodies and self-government institutions once the electoral process has been set in motion. Article 243(o) of the Constitution bars interference in poll matters set in motion by the SECs. Article 329 bars interference in such matters set in motion by the AK. Only after the polls are over can the SEC's decisions or conduct be questioned through an election petition. These powers enjoyed by the SECs are the same as those by the AK. Insta-links. Topics: Salient features of the Representation of People's Act. 1. Registration of political parties. Context. As per Association for Democratic Reforms, S. latest report. 1. The contribution reports of only 78 of the total 2,301 registered and recognized political parties are available in the public domain for 2018-19. 2. The reports of only 82 such parties for 2017-18 are uploaded on the respective state chief electoral officers' websites. 3. The number of these parties increased twofold in the last 10 years, from 1,112 in 2010 to 2,301 in 2019. What are unrecognized political parties? Either newly registered parties or those which have not secured enough percentage of votes in assembly or general elections to become a state party, or those which have never contested in elections since being registered are considered unrecognized parties. Such parties don't enjoy all the benefits extended to the recognized parties. Unrecognized political parties in India. There are 2,360 political parties registered with the Election Commission of India and 2,301, and 97.50% of them are unrecognized. Registration of political parties. Registration of political parties is governed by the provisions of Section 29A of the Representation of the People Act, 1951. A party seeking registration under the said section with the Election Commission has to submit an application to the Commission within a period of 30 days following the date of its formation as per guidelines prescribed by the Election Commission of India in exercise of the powers conferred by Article 324 of the Commission of India and Section 29A of the Representation of the People Act, 1951. To be eligible for a National Political Party of India. 1. It secures at least 6% of the valid votes polled in any 4 or more states, at a general election to the House of the People or to the State Legislative Assembly. 2. In addition, it wins at least 4 seats in the House of the People from any state or states. 3. It wins at least 2% seats in the House of the People, and these members are elected from at least 3 different states. To be eligible for a state political party. 1. It secures at least 6% of the valid votes polled in the state at a general election, either to the House of the People or to the Legislative Assembly of the state concerned. 2. In addition, it wins at least 2 seats in the Legislative Assembly of the state concerned. 3. It wins at least 3% of the total number of seats in the Legislative Assembly of the state, or at least 3 seats in the Assembly, whichever is more. Benefits. 1. If a party is recognized as a state party, it is entitled for exclusive allotment of its reserved symbol to the candidates set up by it in the state in which it is so recognized. And if a party is recognized as a national party, it is entitled for exclusive allotment of its reserved symbol to the candidates set up by it throughout India. 2. Recognized state and national parties need only one proposer for filing the nomination and are also entitled for 2 sets of electoral rolls free of cost at the time of revision of rolls, and their candidates get 1 copy of electoral roll free of cost during general elections. 3. They also get telecast facilities over Akashvani Doordarshan during general elections. 4. The travel expenses of star campaigners are not to be accounted for in the election expense accounts of candidates of their party. 2. No postal ballots for NRIs this time, AC. Context. The Election Commission has said that postal ballots facility would not be extended to NRIs for the upcoming elections to the Assam, Tamil Nadu, Puducherry, Kerala and West Bengal assemblies. Background. The Election Commission of India had written to the Law Ministry on November 27, 2020 with the proposal of extending postal ballots to overseas electors. EC's note was further referred to the Ministry of External Affairs. The MA was of the opinion that a wider meeting of stakeholders should be held. How the electronically transmitted postal ballot system works. 1. Under ETPBS, postal ballot is sent electronically to a service voter. 2. The voter downloads it and uses a specific envelope to return it to the returning officer of his constituency. 3. The postal ballot should reach the returning officer by 8 a.m. on the day of the counting. Counting of votes begin with counting of postal ballots at 8 a.m. Amendments. To extend the voting facility to overseas voters, government needs to only amend the Conduct of Election Rules 1961, and doesn't require Parliament's nod. What is the current process of voting for Indian citizens living abroad? Voting rights for NRIs were introduced only in 2011, through an amendment to the Representation of the People Act 1950. An NRI can vote in the constituency in which her place of residence, as mentioned in the passport, is located. She can only vote in person and will have to produce her passport in original at the polling station for establishing identity. What is current strength of NRI voters? According to a UN report of 2015, India's diaspora population is the largest in the world at 16 million people. Insta-links, prelims link. 1. What is postal ballot? 2. Who can cast their votes? 1. Lokpal panel minutes need not be disclosed. Context. The Centre has refused to disclose the minutes of the Lokpal Selection Committee's meetings, and its decision has now been upheld by the Central Information Commission. The Centre has invoked the exemption clause in Section 8 of the RTI Act in its defense. Selection Committee. The members are appointed by the President on the recommendation of a selection committee. The selection committee is composed of the Prime Minister, who is the chairperson, Speaker of Lok Sabha, Leader of Opposition in Lok Sabha, Chief Justice of India or a judge nominated by him, her, and one eminent jurist. The 2016 amendment enables the leader of the single largest opposition party in the Lok Sabha to be a member of the selection committee in the absence of a recognized leader of opposition. Highlights of the Lokpal Act of 2013. 1. The Act allows setting up of anti-corruption ombudsman called Lokpal at the centre and Lokayukt at the state level. 2. The Lokpal will consist of a chairperson and a maximum of 8 members. 3. The Lokpal will cover all categories of public servants, including the Prime Minister. But the armed forces do not come under the ambit of Lokpal. 4. The Act also incorporates provisions for attachment and confiscation of property acquired by corrupt means, even while the prosecution is pending. 5. The states will have to institute Lokayukt within 1 year of the commencement of the Act. 6. The Act also ensures that public servants who act as whistleblowers are protected. Powers. 1. The Lokpal will have the power of superintendence and direction over any investigation agency including CBI for cases referred to them by the Ombudsman. 2. As per the Act, the Lokpal can summon or question any public servant if there exists a prima facie case against the person, even before an investigation agency has begun the probe. Any officer of the CBI investigating a case referred to it by the Lokpal shall not be transferred without the approval of the Lokpal. 3. An investigation must be completed within 6 months. However, the Lokpal or Lokayukt may allow extensions of 6 months at a time provided the reasons for the need of such extensions are given in writing. 4. Special courts will be instituted to conduct trials on cases referred by Lokpal. Topics: Government policies and interventions for development in various sectors and issues arising out of their design and implementation. 1. 14 new minor forest produce items included under MSP scheme. Context: the government has decided to include 14 new minor forest produce items under the mechanism for marketing of minor forest produce through a minimum support price scheme. Newly included items are tasar cocoon, elephant apple dry, bamboo shoot, mulkangani seed and wild dry mushroom among others. About the scheme. The central government had introduced a minimum support price for a selected list of minor produce items through mechanism for marketing of minor forest produce through minimum support price and development of value chain of MFP scheme in 2011. It aims to provide a social safety net to these underprivileged forest dwellers, and to aid in their empowerment. Implementation. 1. The responsibility of purchasing MFP on MSP will be with state designated agencies. 2. To a certain market price, services of market correspondents would be availed by the designated agencies, particularly for major markets trading in MFP. 3. The scheme supports primary value addition as well as provides for supply chain infrastructure like cold storage, warehouses, etc. 4. The Ministry of Tribal Affairs will be the nodal ministry for implementation and monitoring of the scheme. The minimum support price would be determined by the ministry with technical help of TRIFED. What is MFP? Section 2 of the Forest Rights Act defines a minor forest produce as all non-timber forest produce of plant origin and includes bamboo, brushwood, stumps, canes, cocoon, honey, waxes, lac, kendu leaves, medicinal plants etc. Installing. 2. Arbitration and Conciliation Bill, 2021. Context. Lok Sabha passes Arbitration and Conciliation Bill, 2021. It is already in force by way of an ordinance promulgated on the 4th of November 2020. Highlights of the bill. 1. It seeks to amend the Arbitration and Conciliation Act, 1996 so as to enable automatic stay on awards in certain cases and specify by regulations the qualifications, experience and norms for accreditation of arbitrators. 2. Seeks to ensure that stakeholder parties can seek an unconditional stay on enforcement of arbitral awards in cases where the arbitration agreement or contract is induced by fraud or corruption. 3. Also does away with the 8th schedule of the Act that contained the necessary qualifications for accreditation of arbitrators. 4. Added a proviso in Section 36 of the Arbitration Act and will come into effect retrospectively from October 23, 2015. As per this amendment, if the court is satisfied that a prima facie case is made out that the arbitration agreement or contract which is the basis of the award was induced or affected by fraud or corruption, it will stay the award unconditionally pending disposal of the challenge made to the award under Section 34. Issues raised with respect to proposed amendment to Section 36 of the Act. 1. It is very easy for the losing party to allege corruption and obtain an automatic stay on enforcement of the arbitral award. Thereafter, the parties will have to wait for enforcement till final disposal by the court. This defeats the very objective of alternate dispute mechanism by drawing parties to courts and making them prone to prolonged litigation. 2. Legislation does not define fraud corruption. 3. Retrospective application of Amendment Act with respect to automatic stay may open floodgates of litigation. 4. Amendment will affect enforcement of contracts and ultimately affect ease of doing business in India. Background. Until recently, an arbitration award was enforceable even if an appeal was filed against it in the court under Section 36 of the law. The court, however, could grant a stay on the award on conditions as it deemed fit. What is arbitration? Arbitration is an alternative dispute resolution procedure in which a dispute is submitted, by agreement of the parties, to one or more arbitrators who make a binding decision on the dispute. In choosing arbitration, the parties opt for a private dispute resolution procedure instead of going to court. What is conciliation? Conciliation is also an alternative dispute resolution instrument where parties seek to reach an amicable dispute settlement with the assistance of the conciliator, who acts as a neutral third party. Is a voluntary proceeding, where the parties involved are free to agree and attempt to resolve their dispute by conciliation. Liberalized. Context. The Ministry of Science and Technology has released new guidelines for the geospatial sector in India, which deregulates existing protocol and liberalizes the sector to a more competitive field. Under the new guidelines, the sector will be deregulated in aspects such as prior approvals for surveying, mapping and building applications based on that have been done away with. For Indian entities, there will be complete deregulation with no prior approvals, security clearances and licenses for the acquisition and production of geospatial data and geospatial data services, including maps. Benefits. It will help boost innovation in the sector and create a level playing field for public and private entities. The easing of norms will greatly help in several sectors that were suffering because of non-availability of high-quality maps. The move will unlock tremendous opportunities for the country's startups, private sector, public sector, and research institutions to drive innovations and build scalable solutions. It will also generate employment and accelerate economic growth. India's farmers will also be benefited by leveraging the potential of geospatial and remote sensing data. The deregulation eliminates the requirement of permissions as well as scrutiny, even for security concerns. What is geospatial data? 1. Geospatial data is data about objects, events, or phenomena that have a location on the surface of the Earth. 2. The location may be static in the short term, like the location of a road, an earthquake event, or dynamic like a moving vehicle or pedestrian, the spread of an infectious disease. 3. Geospatial data combines location information, attribute information, and often also temporal information or the time at which the location and attributes exist. Applications. 1. Geospatial data usually involves information of public interest such as roads, localities, rail lines, water bodies, and public amenities. 2. The past decade has seen an increase in the use of geospatial data in daily life with various apps such as food delivery apps like Swiggy or Zomato, e-commerce like Amazon, or even weather apps. What is the present policy on geospatial data? There are strict restrictions on the collection, storage, use, sale, dissemination of geospatial data and mapping under the current regime. The policy had not been renewed in decades and has been driven by internal as well as external security concerns. The sector so far is dominated by the Indian government as well as government-run agencies such as the Survey of India, and private companies need to navigate a system of permissions from different departments of the government as well as the defense and home ministries, to be able to collect, create or disseminate geospatial data. 4. More financial powers for senior officers. Context. The Cabinet has approved enhanced delegation of financial powers for capital procurement to senior officers below the rank of Vice Chief of Armed Forces. Significance. The delegation of power will help in the modernization of armed forces. DAP 2020. It was unveiled in September 2020. The new policy superseded the Defense Procurement Procedure of 2016 from October 1, 2020. The DAP contains policies and procedures for procurement and acquisition from the capital budget of the MOD in order to modernize the armed forces, including the Coast Guard. Highlights of the new policy. 1. Reservations for indigenous firms. The policy reserves several procurement categories for indigenous firms. DAP 2020 defines an Indian vendor as a company that is owned and controlled by resident Indian citizens, with foreign direct investment not more than 49%. 2. New by category. This stipulates indigenization of at least 50% of the overall contract value of a foreign purchase bought with the intention of subsequently building it in India with technology transfer. 3. Greater indigenous content. It promotes greater indigenous content in arms and equipment of the military procures, including equipment manufactured in India under license. In most acquisition categories, DAP 2020 stipulates 10% higher indigenization than DPP 2016. 4. Import embargo list. The import embargo list of 101 items that the government had promulgated has been specifically incorporated into DAP 2020. 5. Offset liability. The government has decided not to have an offset clause in procurement of defense equipment if the deal is done through inter-government agreement, government to government, or an ab initio single vendor. The offset clause requires a foreign vendor to invest a part of the contract value in India. 5. Amendments to Juvenile Justice Act. Context. The Union Cabinet has approved a slew of amendments to the Juvenile Justice Act, 2015. The latest amendments. 1. Empower the district magistrates to issue adoption orders as well as monitor the implementation of the law. 2. Empower the DMs and the additional DMs to monitor the functioning of agencies responsible for implementing the JJ Act. 3. The district child protection units will function under the DMs. 4. Before someone sets up a shelter home for children and sends their proposal for registration under the JJ Act to the state, ADM will have to assess their capacity and conduct the background check. 5. The DM could also independently evaluate the functioning of the Child Welfare Committee, Special Juvenile Protection Units, and registered childcare institutes. About JJ Act. 1. Replace the 2000 Act, the Juvenile Justice Act, 2000. 2. Aim to comprehensively address children in conflict with law and children in need of care and protection. 3. It mandates setting up juvenile justice boards and child welfare committees in every district. Both must have at least one woman member each. 4. Also, the Central Adoption Resource Authority was granted the status of a statutory body to enable it to perform its function more effectively. 5. The Act included several new offences committed against children which are not adequately covered under any other law. 6. All child care institutions, whether run by state government or by voluntary or non-governmental organizations, are to be mandatorily registered under the Act within 6 months from the date of commencement of the Act. Link. 6. No role in Tamil Nadu government's quota decisions, Centre tells SC. Context. The Centre has told the Supreme Court that it has no role in the choices made by the Tamil Nadu government with regard to the provision of reservation for specific castes or communities in state government jobs and admissions. What's the issue? The Centre was responding to a petition challenging the constitutionality of the Tamil Nadu Backward Classes, SC and ST Act of 1993, which provides 69% reservation in the state. The petitioner contended that the Tamil Nadu legislature acted outside its competence. TN has identified and classified socially and educationally backward classes, that too far in excess of the 50% limit on quota laid down by a 9-judge bench of the SC in its judgment in the Indira Soni case. Centre's stand. Inclusion or exclusion of any caste community in the state list of SEBCs is the subject matter of the state government, and the Government of India has no role in the matter. It referred to the Constitution Act of 2018, which details the difference in the procedure for inclusion or exclusion of castes and communities in the state list for SEBCs and the central list. The power to identify and specify SEBCs lies with Parliament only with reference to the central list. Under the newly inserted Article 342A of the Constitution Act of 2018, the President notifies the SEBCs in a state after consultation with the Governor. Insta-links, prelims link. 1. Constitutional provisions WRT2 reservations. 2. Overview of Articles 32, 226, 14, 15 and 16. 3. Overview of the 7th Schedule of the Indian Constitution. 4. What are writs? 5. Difference in powers of SC and HCWRT writ jurisdictions. 6. Indira Soni case verdict. 7. Who can empower any other court to issue writs? Mains link. Reservation is not a fundamental right. Discuss in the light of recent verdict of the Supreme Court. Link. OJD equals G3789P57U.1 and image view. 7. 1 Rank 1 Pension Scheme. Context. The review of 1 Rank 1 pension has been pending since June 2020. The issue was discussed during the recent parliamentary panel meet. Background. There are certain loopholes which need to be fixed in the scheme. A committee has been constituted to look into the issue by the Defense Ministry to work out the modalities of the revision, but no announcement has been made on when the revision would be undertaken. What is OROP? OROP implies uniform pension to personnel based on rank and length of service, irrespective of the date of retirement. The government had implemented the long pending demand of veterans in November 2015, and as per the notification, it is to be revised every 5 years. Armed Forces personnel who had retired till the 30th of June 2014 are covered under it. The implementation of the scheme was based on recommendation of the Koshiari Committee. Insta links, prelims link, 1. What is 8. SC refuses petition against MP ordinance. Context. The Supreme Court has declined to entertain a petition challenging the validity of the controversial Madhya Pradesh ordinance regulating religious conversions through interfaith marriages. Instead, it asked the petitioner to approach the High Court. What did the petitioner say? The plea said the law, which followed a similar ordinance made by Uttar Pradesh, infringed a person's right to privacy and freedom of choice, leading to violations of fundamental rights under Articles 14, 19 and 21 of the Constitution. Similar law is in force in Uttarakhand. Key provisions of the Madhya Pradesh Dharmik Swatantrata Bill 2020-1 seeks to regulate interfaith marriages in the state. 2. Exempts reconversion to parental religion from its purview. 3. Jail term of up to 10 years and a fine of 1 lakh rupees for conversion through marriage or other forcible means. 4. Seeks to prohibit religious conversions or an attempt of conversion by means of misrepresentation, allurement, threat, undue influence, coercion, marriage, and any other fraudulent means. 5. The conspiracy and abetting a person for conversion has also been prohibited. 6. Forceful conversions and marriages will be a cognizable offense and be non-bailable. Supreme Court on Marriage and Conversion. The Apex Court of India in its several judgments has held that the state and the courts have no jurisdiction over an adult's absolute right to choose a life partner. The Supreme Court of India, in both the Lily Thomas and Sarla Mudgal cases, has confirmed that religious conversions carried out without a bona fide belief in for the sole purpose of deriving some legal benefit do not hold water. Instalinks. 9. UP Assembly passes bill on conversion amid protests. Context. Uttar Pradesh Legislative Assembly passed Uttar Pradesh Prohibition of Unlawful Conversion of Religion Bill, 2021. The bill seeks to replace the ordinance promulgated in November last year that seeks to curb religious conversions carried out by fraudulent or any other undue means. Key provisions. 1. It makes religious conversion for marriage a non-bailable offense. 2. The onus will be on the defendant to prove that conversion was not for marriage. 3. The notice period to the district magistrate for the religious conversion is 2 months. 4. In case of conversion done by a woman for the sole purpose of marriage, the marriage would be declared null and void. Penalties. 1. Violation of the provisions of the law would invite a jail term of not less than 1 year extendable to 5 years with a fine of 15,000 rupees. 2. If a minor woman or a woman from the scheduled caste or scheduled tribes communities was converted through the said unlawful means, the jail term would be a minimum of 3 years and could be extended to 10 years with a fine of 25,000 rupees. 3. The bill also lays down strict action, including cancellation of registration of social organizations conducting mass conversions. Why this has become a controversial law? The ordinance, passed in November 2020, comes days after the Allahabad High Court said in a verdict that the right to choose a partner or live with a person of choice was part of a citizen's fundamental right to life and liberty. The verdict also said earlier court rulings that religious conversion for marriage was unacceptable, was not good in law. What critics say. The law has come under sharp criticism from several legal scholars who had contended that the concept of love jihad did not have any constitutional or legal basis. They have pointed to Article 21 of the Constitution, which guarantees individuals the right to marry a person of one's choice. Also, under Article 25, freedom of conscience, the practice and conversion of religion of one's choice, including not following any religion, are also guaranteed. What are the concerns associated? What are the challenges ahead? The true danger with this new so-called love jihad law lies in its ambiguity. The law employs the use of open-textured phrases such as undue influence, allurement, and coercion. Indeed, even the question of whether a religious conversion is truly conducted solely for the purpose of a marriage is inherently vague. It is in the subjective assessment and appreciation of these tenuous phrases that the real peril lies. This is a matter left entirely to the discretion of the judge. Views of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court of India, in both the Lily Thomas and Sarla Mudgal cases, has confirmed that religious conversions carried out without a bona fide belief in for the sole purpose of deriving some legal benefit do not hold water. Ojad equals G1D8AH9. Ojad equals G1D8AH9BD.1 and context. To support the production of horticultural items under the One District One Product scheme and provide better nutrition to school children, the Uttar Pradesh government may introduce Sunari Kand, also known as orange-fleshed sweet potatoes, in the hot-cooked food scheme of Anganwadis and the midday meal scheme in primary schools. Background. Under the initial phase of the ODOP program, 106 products have been identified from 103 districts across 27 states. State Export Promotion Committee and District Export Promotion Committee have been constituted in all states and districts of India, except districts of the state of West Bengal. About the scheme. First started by the Uttar Pradesh government. ODOP is aimed at giving a major push to traditional industries synonymous with the respective districts of the state. The objective of the ODOP is to optimize production, productivity and income, preservation and development of local crafts, promotion of art, improvement in product quality and skill development. Background. ODOP is basically a Japanese business development concept, which gained prominence in 1979. It is aimed at promoting a competitive and staple product from a specific area to push sales and improve the standard of living of the local population. Over time, it has been replicated in other Asian countries as well. The main objectives of the One District One Product scheme of Uttar Pradesh are as follows: 1. Preservation and development of local crafts, skills and promotion of the art. 2. Increase in the incomes and local employment. 3. Improvement in product quality and skill development. 4. Transforming the products in an artistic way. 5. To connect the production with tourism. 6. To resolve the issues of economic difference and regional imbalance. 7. To take the concept of ODOP to national and international level after successful implementation at state level. In 2. Atal Bimit Vyakti Kalyan Yojana. Context. Employees State Insurance Corporation has decided that in cases where the employer has shown 0 contribution in respect of an employee for some months before exiting him from the system, the relief under ABVKY for such period of 0 contribution shall also be allowed. What's the issue? It was brought to the notice of ESIC that in some cases employers have struck off their employees from the rolls few months after actually terminating them from service. During this period, ISI contribution was also not filed by the employers for these employees in the system. As the relief under Atal Bimit Vyakti Kalyan Yojana is available only in case of unemployment of the insured persons, such employees, though terminated from service, became ineligible for relief under the scheme. About the scheme. It is a welfare measure being implemented by the Employees State Insurance Corporation. It offers cash compensation to insured persons when they are rendered unemployed. The scheme was introduced in 2018. In 2020, eligibility criteria for availing the relief were relaxed, as under 1. The payment of relief has been enhanced to 50% of average of wages from earlier 25% of average wages payable up to maximum 90 days of unemployment. 2. Instead of the relief becoming payable 90 days after unemployment, it shall become due for payment after 30 days. 3. The insured person can submit the claim directly to ESIC branch office instead of the claim being forwarded by the last employer, and the payment shall be made directly in the bank account of IP. 4. The insured person should have been insurable employment for a minimum period of 2 years before her unemployment and should have contributed for not less than 78 days in the contribution period immediately preceding to unemployment and minimum 78 days in one of the remaining 3 contribution periods in 2 years prior to. The scheme has crossed 1.753 Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana. Context. The scheme has crossed 1.75 crore eligible women till financial year 2020. About PMMVY. It is a maternity benefit program that is implemented in all the districts of the country in accordance with the provision of the National Food Security Act, 2013. Under PMMVY, pregnant women and lactating mothers receive 5,000 rupees on the birth of their first child in 3 installments, after fulfilling certain conditionalities. It excludes those PW&LM who are in regular employment with the central government or the state governments or PSUs, or those who are in receipt of similar benefits under any law for the time being in force. The direct benefit cash transfer is to help expectant mothers meet enhanced nutritional requirements as well as to partially compensate them for wage loss during their pregnancy. The scheme was announced on December 31, 2016. The eligible beneficiaries would receive the incentive given under the Janani Suraksha Yojana for institutional delivery, and the incentive received under JSY would be accounted towards maternity benefits, so that on an average a woman gets 6,000 rupees per. 4. Elderly abuse a growing concern in India, shows LASI. Context. Longitudinal Aging Study in India is a national survey of scientific investigation of the health, economic, and social determinants and consequences of population aging in India. The report was recently released. Key findings. 1. At least 5% of India's elderly population stated they experienced ill treatment in 2020. 2. Bihar records highest share of elderly persons ill-treated in India. 3. Among the elderly who felt ill-treated, 77.3% complained of verbal, emotional ill-treatment that can harm their self-worth or emotional well-being. 4. The emotional harm that may emerge from verbal or emotional abuse encompasses torture, sorrow, fear, perverse emotional discomfort, loss of personal pride or sovereignty. 5. Among those who reported as experiencing ill treatment, the victims of physical ill treatment were the highest in Arunachal Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh. 6. Elderly respondents experiencing verbal, emotional ill treatment was the highest in the states of Uttarakhand. What is elderly abuse? What are the reasons for it? Abuse of the elderly is a growing international problem with several manifestations in different countries and cultures. It is a fundamental violation of human rights and leads to several health and emotional problems. The abuse can be classified as physical, sexual, psychological, or financial. The ill treatment is relatively more frequent among elderly women and those living in rural areas, according to the report. A lot of women lose support as they lose their partners to old age. This group of people generally has no income source or economic activity. What needs to be done? The obstacle of elder abuse cannot be adequately solved if older people's essential needs for food, shelter, protection, and access to healthcare are not met. 1. Good quality healthcare be made available and accessible to the elderly in an age-sensitive manner. 2. Rehabilitation, community or home-based disability support and end-of-life care should also be provided where needed, in a holistic manner, to effectively address the issue to failing health among the elderly. 3. Those who are unable to generate an adequate income should be facilitated to do so. 4. The best way to address neglect of the elderly is to counsel families, sensitize community leaders, and address the issue at all levels in different forums, including the print and audiovisual media. Management of social sector services relating to health, education, human resources. 1. STARS project to develop education. Context. Ministry of Education, Department of Economic Affairs, and World Bank have signed an agreement for the financial support worth 5,718 crore rupees towards the implementation of the Strengthening Teaching Learning and Results for States project. About the project. STARS stands for Strengthening Teaching Learning and Results for States program. STARS project would be implemented as a new centrally sponsored scheme under the Department of School Education and Literacy, Ministry of Education. It is a project to improve the quality and governance of school education in 6 Indian states. 6 states are Himachal Pradesh, Kerala, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Orissa, and Rajasthan. Some 250 million students in 1.5 million schools, and over 10 million teachers will benefit from the program. Reform initiatives under the project include 1. Focusing more directly on the delivery of education services at the state, district, and sub-district levels by providing customized local-level solutions towards school improvement. 2. Addressing demands from stakeholders, especially parents, for greater accountability and inclusion by producing better data to assess the quality of learning, giving special attention to students from vulnerable section. 3. Equipping teachers to manage this transformation by recognizing that teachers are central to achieving better learning outcomes. 4. Investing more in developing India's human capital needs by strengthening foundational learning for children in classes 1 to 3 and preparing them with the cognitive, socio-behavioral and language skills to meet future labor market needs. Unique components of the project. Contingency Emergency Response Component. The project includes a contingency emergency response component under the national component which would enable it to be more responsive to any natural, man-made and health disasters. It will help the government respond to situations leading to loss of learning such as school closures, infrastructure damage, inadequate facilities and use technology for facilitating remote learning etc. The CERC component would facilitate the rapid recategorization of financing and the utilization of streamlined financing request procedures. Parak. A major component of the project is the establishment of Parak as a national assessment center. Included in the National Education Policy 2020, this autonomous institution under the Union Education Ministry will set norms for student assessment and evaluation for all school boards across the country, most of which currently follow norms set by state governments. It will also guide standardized testing to monitor learning outcomes at the state and national levels, according to the NEP. Instalinks, 2. FSSAI caps trans fatty acids in food. Context. The Food Safety and Standards Authority of India has restricted the permissible amount of industrial trans fatty acid in food products to 2% from 2022. Background. In December, the FSSAI had capped TFAs in oils and fats to 3% by 2021, and 2% by 2022 from the current levels of 5%. Applicability. Food products that incorporate edible oils and fats as ingredients, including edible refined oils, vanaspati partially hydrogenated oils, margarine, vegetable fat spreads, mixed fat spreads, bakery shortenings, fall under the ambit of the newly issued regulations. What are industrial trans fatty acids? Trans fatty acids are created in an industrial process that adds hydrogen to liquid vegetable oils to make them more solid, increase shelf life of food items and for use as an adulterant as they are cheap. They are present in baked, fried and processed foods as well as adulterated ghee which becomes solid at room temperature. They are the most harmful form of fats as they clog arteries and cause hypertension, heart attacks and other cardiovascular diseases. 3. Impact of school closure on foundational abilities of students. Context. Azim Premji University conducted a field study to assess the impact of COVID-19 induced lockdown on students. The study was titled, Loss of Learning During the Pandemic. Key findings. 1. Children missed out on the regular curricular learning they would have acquired had schools remained open. 2. They are also forgetting what they had learnt in previous year. 3. On an average, 92% of students from classes 2nd to 6 have lost at least one specific foundational ability in languages that they may have acquired in previous years. The corresponding figure for mathematics is 82%. What are foundational abilities? Foundational abilities are those that form the basis for further learning. Some examples of foundational abilities include reading a paragraph with comprehension, addition and subtraction. In mathematics, foundation abilities include identifying single and two-digit numbers, performing arithmetic operations, using basic arithmetic operations to solve problems, and reading and drawing inferences from data, among others. What are the challenges ahead? When schools reopen, teachers have to be given time to cover this deficit and be provided with other support. A carefully synchronized set of measures across states will be required. Suggestions. Eliminating vacations, extending the academic year well into 2021 and perhaps beyond depending on when schools open and reconfiguring the syllabus. Instalinks, prelim. 4. Ebola. Context. A new case of Ebola was diagnosed in Democratic Republic of Congo recently. Background. Following an outbreak in June 2020, the region was declared Ebola-free in November after no new cases were reported in more than 48 days. What you need to know about Ebola. Ebola virus disease, formerly known as Ebola hemorrhagic fever, is a severe, often fatal illness in humans. Transmission. The virus is transmitted to people from wild animals and spreads in the human population through human-to-human transmission. The average EVD case fatality rate is around 50%. Case fatality rates have varied from 25% to 90% in past outbreaks. Prevention. Community engagement is key to successfully controlling outbreaks. Good outbreak control relies on case management, surveillance and contact tracing, a good laboratory service and social mobilization. Treatment. Early supportive care with rehydration. Symptomatic treatment improves survival. There is yet no licensed treatment proven to neutralize the virus, but a range of blood, immunological, and drug therapies are under development. Vaccines. An experimental Ebola vaccine, called RVSV-ZEBOV, proved highly protective against EVD in a major trial in Guinea in 2015. The RVSV-ZEBOV vaccine is being used in the ongoing 2018-2019 Ebola outbreak in DRC. Pregnant and breastfeeding women should have access to the vaccine under the same conditions as for the general population. The public mistrust and militia attacks have prevented health workers from reaching some hard-hit areas for administering the vaccines. 5. What is the South African COVID variant? Context. The WHO has identified 3 new variants of coronavirus originating in the UK, Brazil, and now in South Africa. What's the concern? Of the 3, the latest South African variant, known as 20H501Y, V2 or B.1.351, is different from the one in Britain and appears to be more infectious than the original virus. The South African variant carries a mutation called N501Y that appears to make it more contagious or easy to spread, a report in the New York Times said. Also, the WHO has said this variant is less susceptible to antibody neutralization than previous variants. Why do viruses mutate? A mutation just means a difference, a letter change in the genome. Mutations in viruses are a natural part of evolution. The pressure on the virus to evolve is increased by the fact that so many millions of people have now been infected. In the case of SARS-CoV-2, which is an ribonucleic acid virus, a mutation means a change in the sequence in which its molecules are arranged. A mutation in an RNA virus often happens when the virus makes a mistake while it is making copies of itself. 6. Acute encephalitis syndrome. Context. First ACE case of the year suspected in Muzaffarpur. Usually ACE, locally called Chamki Bukhar, surfaces during summer in the flood-prone districts of North Bihar. Background. ACE cases were reported from 5 North Bihar districts in 2019. More than 150 children died. More than 600 children suffering from ACE were admitted in the hospitals, including SKMCH, and nearly 450 recovered. About ACE. Acute encephalitis syndrome is a basket term used for referring to hospitals, children with clinical neurological manifestation that includes mental confusion, disorientation, convulsion, delirium, or coma. Meningitis caused by virus or bacteria, encephalitis caused by virus, encephalopathy, cerebral malaria, and scrub typhus caused by bacteria are collectively called acute encephalitis syndrome. The disease most commonly affects children and young adults and can lead to considerable morbidity and mortality. Symptoms. It is characterized as acute onset of fever and a change in mental status and or new onset of seizures in a person of any age at any time of the year. Cause of the disease. Acute encephalitis syndrome is considered a very complex disease as it can be caused by various agents including bacteria, fungi, virus, and many other agents. Japanese encephalitis virus is the major cause of ACE in India. Nipah virus, Zika virus are also found as causative agents for ACE. How is it related to lychee fruits? How it affects. In India, ACE outbreaks in north and eastern India have been linked to children eating unripe lychee fruit on empty stomachs. Unripe fruit contain the toxins hypoglycin A and methylnisoclopropylglycine, which cause vomiting if ingested in large quantities. Hypoglycin A is a naturally occurring amino acid found in the unripened lychee that causes severe vomiting. While MCPG is a poisonous compound found in lychee seeds. Why it affects undernourished children. Blood glucose falls sharply, causing severe brain malfunction, leading to seizures and coma, and death in many cases. This is because undernourished children lack sufficient glucose reserve in the form of glycogen, and the production of glucose from non-carbohydrate source is blocked midway, leading to low blood sugar level. This causes serious brain function derangement and seizures. Measures needed. 1. Increase access to safe drinking water and proper sanitation facilities. 2. Improve nutritional status of children at risk of ACE. 3. Preparative measures to be in place before the possible outbreaks. 4. Vector control. 5. Better awareness generation among children, parents through Anganwadi workers etc. Insta-Show launched. Context. Intensified Mission Indradhanush 3.0 launched to expand immunization coverage across the country. The focus of IMI 3.0 will be on children and pregnant women who missed their vaccine doses during the COVID-19 pandemic. What is Mission Indradhanush? To strengthen and re-energize the program and achieve full immunization coverage for all children and pregnant women at a rapid pace, the Government of India launched Mission Indradhanush in December 2014. Mission Indradhanush's goal. The ultimate goal is to ensure full immunization with all available vaccines for children up to 2 years of age and pregnant women. Diseases covered. It provides vaccination against 12 vaccine preventable diseases, i.e., diphtheria, whooping cough, tetanus, polio, tuberculosis, hepatitis B, meningitis and pneumonia, Haemophilus influenza type B infections, Japanese encephalitis, rotavirus vaccine, pneumococcal conjugate vaccine and measles rubella. However, vaccination against Japanese encephalitis and Haemophilus influenza type B is being provided in selected districts of the country. Intensified Mission Indradhanush. To further intensify the immunization program, Prime Minister Narendra Modi launched the Intensified Mission on October 8, 2017. With this, the Government of India aims to reach each and every child up to 2 years of age and all those pregnant women who have been left uncovered under the Routine Immunization Program (UIP). The special drive was to focus on improving immunization coverage in select districts and cities to ensure full immunization to more than 90% by December 2018. 8. Pandemic Generation, Hit Hard, CSE. Context. State of Environment Report, 2021 was recently released by the Center for Science and Environment. Highlights, Impact by COVID-19. 1. Biggest concern, India is all set to usher in a pandemic generation, with 375 million children likely to suffer long-lasting impacts. 2. The challenges could range from being underweight, stunting and increased child mortality, to losses in education and work productivity. 3. Over 500 million children have been forced out of school globally, and India accounts for more than half of them. 4. 115 million additional people might get pushed into extreme poverty by the pandemic, and most of them live in South Asia. 5. India ranked 117 among 192 nations in terms of sustainable development and was now behind all South Asian nations, except Pakistan. State of Environment. 1. India's air, water and land have become more polluted between 2009 and 2018. 2. Of 88 major industrial clusters in the country, 35 showed overall environmental degradation, 33 pointed to worsening air quality, 45 had more polluted water, and in 17, land pollution became worse. 3. Tarapur in Maharashtra emerged as the most polluted cluster. 4. This data clearly indicated a lack of action over the years to control and reduce pollution even in areas that were already identified as critically or severely polluted. Performance of various states. When ranked on the basis of achieving sustainable development goals. 1. The best performing states were Kerala, Himachal Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu and Telangana. 2. The worst performers were Bihar, Jharkhand, Arunachal Pradesh, Meghalaya and Uttar Pradesh. Insta links. Have a brief overview of the key findings. Link. Topics: Important aspects of governance, transparency and accountability, e-governance applications, models, successes, limitations, and potential, citizens' charters, transparency and accountability in institutional and other measures. 1. Amendments made to the Right to Information Act. Context. The Supreme Court has criticized the Union government for having not filed a reply to a petition by parliamentarian Jairam Ramesh challenging the amendments made to the Right to Information Act for over a year. What's the issue? The petitioner argues that the amendments gave the centre unparalleled powers to dictate the tenure, salaries and service conditions of the Chief Information Commissioner and Information Commissioners as per its whims and fancies. The petitioner contended that the RTI Amendment Act of 2019 and its rules cripple the objectivity and independence of the Central Information Commission by bringing under the yoke of the government. What were the amendments? 1. The centre shall have the powers to set the salaries and service conditions of information commissioners at central as well as state levels. 2. Term of the Central Chief Information Commissioner and Information Commissioners, appointment will be, for such term as may be prescribed by the central government. 3. While the original Act prescribed salaries, allowances and other terms of service of the State Chief Information Commissioner as the same as that of an election commissioner. And the salaries and other terms of service of the State Information Commissioners is the same as that of the Chief Secretary to the state government. The amendment proposes that these shall be such as may be prescribed by the central government. Why these amendments are criticized? The amendments are seen as a threat to the independence of the Central Information Commissioner. By diminishing the status of the CIC, IC and state CIC from that of a Supreme Court judge would reduce their ability to issue directives to senior government functionaries. The amendments would empower the center to make rules to decide the tenure, salary, allowances and other terms of service of information commissioners of the central and also state information commissions. This will fundamentally weaken the institution of the information commissions as it will adversely impact the ability of commissioners to function in an independent manner. The government held no public consultations on the bill. What are the government's stated grounds for bringing the amendments? The statement of objects says, the mandate of Election Commission of India and Central and State Information Commissions are different. Hence, their status and service conditions need to be rationalized accordingly. CIC has been given the status of a Supreme Court judge, but his judgments can be challenged in the high courts. Therefore, the amendments have been brought to correct certain anomalies in the RTI Act. It does not dilute the Act in any way and it was passed in a hurry in 2005. RTI amendments would strengthen the overall RTI structure. Instalinks, Prelims Link. 1. Definition of public authority under the Act. 2. Exceptions under the Act. 3. About Chief Information Commissioner. 4. State topics, role of civil services in a democracy. 1. Corruption Perception Index 2020. Context. Corruption Perception Index 2020 has been released. Filled circle. It is prepared by Transparency International. What is Corruption Perceptions Index? It is a composite index that draws from 12 surveys to rank nations around the globe. It has become a benchmark gauge of perceptions of corruption and is used by analysts and investors. The index is also based on expert opinions of public sector corruption and takes note of range of factors like whether governmental leaders are held to account or go unpunished for corruption, the perceived prevalence of bribery, and whether public institutions respond to citizens' needs. How are the countries ranked? It ranks 180 countries and territories by their perceived levels of public sector corruption, according to experts and business people. It uses a scale of 0 to 100, where 0 is highly corrupt and 100 is very clean. India's performance. India slipped 6 places to 86th position this year. India's score is below the average score of the Asia-Pacific region and global average. India's overall score is also 2 points less than that of China, which docked at 78th position. Overall best and worst performers. The list was topped by New Zealand and Denmark. South Sudan and Somalia were at the bottom of the global ranking, with scores of 12 each. Corruption and COVID-19. The latest edition of CPI highlighted the impact of corruption on government responses to COVID-19, comparing countries' performance in the index to their investment in healthcare and the extent to which democratic norms and institutions have been weakened during the pandemic. Topics: India and its neighborhood relations. 1. Chabahar Port. Context. India delivers 2 cranes for Chabahar. This is part of a bilateral contract between India and Iran signed in May 2016 for $85 million to equip and operationalize the port. Amid talks with Iranian authorities, it signals a push to the port project. Significance. India's plans to invest further in the port project are seen as an indicator that the government expects some easing up in US sanctions in the upcoming months, once the new Biden administration begins to address its policy on re-entering the Iran nuclear deal. Where is Chabahar Port? Located on the Gulf of Oman and is the only oceanic port of the country. Why Chabahar Port is important for India? 1. With this, India can bypass Pakistan in transporting goods to Afghanistan. 2. It will also boost India's access to Iran, the key gateway to the international north-south transport corridor that has sea, rail and road routes between India, Russia, Iran, Europe and Central Asia. 3. It also helps India counter Chinese presence in the Arabian Sea, which China is trying to ensure by helping Pakistan develop the Gwadar port. Gwadar port is less than 400 kilometers from Chabahar by road and 100 kilometers by sea. 4. With Chabahar port being developed and operated by India, Iran also becomes a military ally to India. Chabahar could be used in case China decides to flex its navy muscles by stationing ships in Gwadar port to reckon its upper hand in the Indian Ocean, Persian Gulf and Middle East. 5. Trade benefits. With Chabahar port becoming functional, there will be a significant boost in the import of iron ore, sugar and rice to India. The import cost of oil to India will also see a considerable decline. India has already increased its crude purchase from Iran since the West-imposed ban on Iran was lifted. 6. From a diplomatic perspective, Chabahar port could be used as a point from where humanitarian operations could be coordinated. Instalinks, prelims link. 1. Location of 2. Military seizes power in Myanmar coup. Context. Myanmar's military has seized power in a coup against the democratically elected government of Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi. The army said it had carried out the detentions in response to election fraud. Implications for India. For India, the return to military rule by Myanmar's Tatmadaw and the detention of Aung San Suu Kyi and the political leadership of the National League of Democracy are a repeat of events 30 years ago. What lies ahead for India? India's reaction is likely to be different this time. India does care about democracy in Myanmar, but that's a luxury it knows it will not be able to afford for the time being. Why? Because 1. India's security relationship with the Myanmar military has become extremely close, and it would be difficult to burn bridges with them given their assistance in securing the northeast frontiers from insurgent groups. 2. Changed image of M. Suu Kyi herself. Her image as a democracy icon and Nobel Peace Laureate has been damaged by her time in office, where she failed to push back the military, and even defended the army's pogrom against Rohingya in Rakhine State in 2015. 3. Benefits for China. A harsh reaction from India, on the lines of that from the US, which has threatened action against those responsible for the coup, unless they revoke the military's takeover, would only benefit China. 4. Apart from strategic concerns, India has cultivated several infrastructure and development projects with Myanmar, which it sees as the gateway to the East and ASEAN countries. 5. Besides, India still hopes to help resolve the issue of Rohingya refugees that fled to Bangladesh, while some still live in India, and will want to continue to engage the Myanmar government on that. Myanmar's military constitution. It was the military that drafted the 2008 constitution, and put it to a questionable referendum in April that year. The constitution was the military's roadmap to democracy, which it had been forced to adopt under increasing pressure from the West. It was also due to its own realization that opening up Myanmar to the outside world was now no longer an option but a dire economic necessity. But the military made sure to safeguard in the constitution its own role and supremacy in national affairs. Under its provisions, the military reserves for itself 25% of seats in both houses of parliament, to which it appoints serving military officials. Also, a political party which is a proxy for the military contests elections. 3. Myanmar vs Burma. Context. The Myanmar military grabbed power in a recent coup, the third time in the nation's history since its independence from British rule in 1948. After the last such takeover in 1988, the armed forces went on to make a decision that would remain controversial for decades, changing the country's name. How Burma became Myanmar. When British imperialists annexed what is today's Myanmar during the 19th century, they called it Burma after the dominant Burman ethnic group, and administered it as a province of colonial India. This arrangement continued until 1937, when Burma was separated from British India and made a separate colony. Even after the country became independent in 1948, it retained the same name, becoming the Union of Burma. In 1962, the military took over from a civilian government for the first time, and amended the official name in 1974 to the Socialist Republic of the Union of Burma. Then in 1988, armed forces again took power in the country, after suppressing a popular uprising and reversed the official name to Union of Burma. But a year later, the junta adopted a law that replaced Burma with Myanmar, making the country the Union of Myanmar. Rationale behind the move and its implications. While changing the country's name, the military said that it was looking for a way to leave behind a name inherited from the colonial past, and adopt a new one which could unify all of its 135 officially recognized ethnic groups, and not just the Burman people. However, critics decried the move, arguing that Myanmar and Burma mean the same thing in the Burmese language, only that the Myanmar is a more formal way of saying Burma, a word used colloquially. 4. Indo-Pacific. Context. India is an important partner in the Indo-Pacific region, says US. It has also welcomed India's emergence as a leading global power and its role as a net security provider in the region. What is Indo-Pacific? The idea of the Indo-Pacific as a single strategic space is an outgrowth of China's growing influence in the Indian Ocean region. It signifies the interconnectedness of the Indian and Pacific Oceans, the importance of the oceans to security and commerce. Importance of Indo-Pacific region. 1. Maintaining regional stability. 2. Strong ties with the US are seen as a vital tool for enhancing India's strategic posture. 3. For the long-term vision of national interest. 4. China's increasingly active presence in the Indian Ocean region as well as its efforts to expand geopolitical reach in Asia and beyond by the use of trade and military. 5. For adhering to freedom of navigation, adherence to rules-based order and stable trade environment. 6. For free sea and air lanes, connectivity and upholding international rules and norms. Role and implications for India in the Indo-Pacific region. The Indo-Pacific, as described in the National Security Strategy, represents the most populous and economically dynamic part of the world and stretches from the west coast of India to the western shores of the United States. India has always been a country with great national ambitions and is one of the most important advocates of the concept of Indo-Pacific strategy. With opening of economy, India has been connecting with its Indian Ocean neighbors and major maritime powers of the world. In 5. Coordinated disengagement at Pangong Tso. Context. India and China have reached an agreement on disengagement in the Pangong Lake area to cease their forward deployments in a phased, coordinated and verified manner. As per the agreement, the Chinese side will keep its troop presence in the North Bank area to east of Finger 8. Reciprocally, the Indian troops will be based at their permanent base at Dhan Singh Thapa post near Finger 3. A similar action would be taken in the South Bank area by both sides. Any structures that had been built by both sides since April 2020 will be removed and the landforms restored. Both sides have agreed on a temporary moratorium on military activities in the North Bank, including patrolling in the traditional areas. Why there is a dispute here? The line of actual control, the line that separates Indian and Chinese troops since 1962 generally runs along the land except for the width of Pangong Tso. Here, it runs through water. Both sides have marked their areas announcing which side belongs to which country. India controls about 45 kilometers stretch of the Pangong Tso and China the rest. The lake is divided into sections called fingers. There are 8 of them in contention here. India and China have different understanding of where the lake passes through. India has maintained that the lake passes through Finger 8, which has been the site of the final military post of China. India has been patrolling the area, mostly on foot because of the nature of the terrain, up to Finger 8. But Indian forces have not had active control beyond Finger 4. China, on the other hand, says the lake passes through Finger 2. It has been patrolling up to Finger 4 mostly in light vehicles, and at times up to Finger 2. Why China wants to encroach areas alongside Pangong Tso? Pangong Tso is strategically crucial as it is very close to Chusul Valley, which was one of the battlefronts between India and China during the 1962 war. China also does not want India to boost its infrastructure anywhere near the lake. China fears it threatens its occupation of Aksai Chin and Lhasa Kashgar highway. Any threat to this highway also puts Chinese rather imperialist plans in Pakistan-occupied territories in Ladakh and Jammu and Kashmir, and beyond in Pakistan. About Pangong Tso. Pangong Tso literally translates into a concave lake. Situated at over 14,000 feet, the lake is about 135 kilometers long. It is formed from Tethys geosyncline. The Karakoram mountain range ends at the north bank of Pangong Tso. Its southern bank too has high broken mountains sloping towards Spingur Lake in the south. Interlinks, prelim. 6. Kailash Range. Context. The Kailash Range was the theatre of conflict during the 1962 Chinese offensive, with key battles at Rezanglar and Gurung Hill. In 2020, Indian troops secured Kailash Ridge in an operation that took the Chinese by surprise. The Kailash Range, the Karakoram Range ends on the northern side of the Pangong Tso. 1. The Kailash Range originates from the southern bank and runs northwest to southeast for over 60 kilometers. 2. The Kailash Ridge is characterized by rugged, broken terrain with heights varying between 4,000–5,500 meters. 3. Its key features include Helmet Top, Gurung Hill, Spangur Gap, Magar Hill, Mukpari, Rezanglar and Rekamla. The ridge dominates Chushul Bowl, an important communications center. Instalinks, Prelims Link. 7. Rohingya Crisis. Context. Bangladesh authorities sent a fourth group of Rohingya refugees from Myanmar to Bhasanchar Island in the Bay of Bengal despite calls by human rights groups for a halt to the process. Background. Bhasanchar is an island specifically developed to accommodate 1,000 of the 1 million Rohingya who have fled from neighboring Myanmar. While human rights groups have criticized the move and some are being forced to go against their will, the government has insisted that refugees moving to the island have done so voluntarily. Who are Rohingyas? They are an ethnic group, mostly Muslims. They were not granted full citizenship by Myanmar. They were classified as resident foreigners or associate citizens. Ethnically, they are much closer to Indo-Aryan people of India and Bangladesh than to the Sino-Tibetans of the country. Described by UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres as one of, if not the, most discriminated people in the world. 8. Pak, to remain in FATF grey list until June. Context. The FATF's plenary and working group meetings, scheduled to be held from February 21 to 26 in Paris, is all set to decide on Pakistan's grey list status. However, Pakistan is unlikely to exit the Financial Action Task Force's grey list until June. Background. Pakistan was placed on the grey list in June 2018 and given a timeline to implement 27 action points. About FATF. The Financial Action Task Force is an intergovernmental body established in 1989 on the initiative of the G7. It is a policy-making body, which works to generate the necessary political will to bring about national legislative and regulatory reforms in various areas. The FATF Secretariat is housed at the OECD headquarters in Paris. Roles and functions. 1. Initially, it was established to examine and develop measures to combat money laundering. 2. In October 2001, the FATF expanded its mandate to incorporate efforts to combat terrorist financing, in addition to money laundering. 3. In April 2012, it added efforts to counter the financing of proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. Composition. The FATF currently comprises 37 member jurisdictions and 2 regional organizations, representing most major financial centers in all parts of the globe. It also has observers and associate members. What is blacklist and grey list? Blacklist, countries known as non-cooperative countries or territories are put in the blacklist. These countries support terror funding and money laundering activities. The FATF revises the blacklist regularly, adding or deleting entries. Grey list, countries that are considered safe haven for supporting terror funding and money laundering are put in the FATF grey list. This inclusion serves as a warning to the country that it may enter the blacklist. Considered in the grey list may face 1. Economic sanctions from IMF, World Bank, ADB. 2. Problem in getting loans from IMF, World Bank, ADB and other countries. 3. Reduction in international trade. 4. International boycott. Instalinks. Prelims link. 9. Sri Lanka Tamils issue. Context. Though Sri Lanka's armed conflict ended in 2009, the entrenched impunity for the deaths of tens of thousands of Tamil civilians in what the United Nations called a bloodbath has kept the conflict on the Human Rights Council's agenda ever since. What happened then? The Tamil minority in Sri Lanka was facing persecution under the rule of the nationalist Sinhalese government. The rift also fueled liberation tigers of Tamil Eelam-led extremism in the nation, which engulfed the nation into years of civil war. Background. Fifth Circle. The previous Sri Lanka government, headed by the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, had co-sponsored the resolution in 2013, calling for accountability in alleged war crimes committed by the government forces and the liberation tigers of Tamil Eelam during the final phase of the near 3-decade-long civil war in May 2009. The current government, led by Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, has officially withdrawn from the resolution. Link. The Kerala government has 10. Kerala Govt. Annuls agreement with US firm. Context. The Kerala government has invalidated a controversial agreement that the Kerala Shipping and Inland Navigation Corporation had reached with the US-based firm, EMCC International, to build and operate a deep-sea trawling fleet to harvest the marine wealth off the state's coast. What's the issue? Opposition called this deal as a bid to sell off the state's marine wealth, endangering the livelihood of lakhs of fishermen in the state. What was the agreement all about? What were the objectives of the project? One of the stated objectives of the deal was deep-sea fishing with state-of-the-art technology. The components of the project were building 400 deep-sea fishing trawlers as per the design proposed by EMCC. The EMCC would train and deploy 1.60 lakh fishermen in deep-sea fishing. Their skills would be upgraded, and the local fishing community would benefit in terms of direct and indirect employment opportunities. How is the proposed project against fisheries policy? The Union government had in 2017 withdrawn permission given for foreign trawlers for deep-sea fishing in the exclusive economic zone of the country. The EEZ of the country extends up to 370 kilometers from the coastline. Illegal fishing by foreign vessels in Indian waters is punishable under provisions of Maritime Zone of India. 1981. Besides, Kerala's fisheries policy, brought in 2018, opposed allowing foreign and native corporate vessels along the state's coast. The professed policy of the state is to equip the traditional fishermen for deep-sea fishing by making them owners of deep-sea fishing vessels. Besides, there would be restrictions on the number of vessels. Only traditional fishermen would be given permission to replace their old boats. What is deep-sea trawling? The deep-sea trawling can be defined as the industrial way or method fishing in which large nets with heavy weight are carted across the seafloor to lift out the catch marine animals such as fishes, shrimp, cod etc. It is considered as the most prominent method of fishing, which is a practice across the world at large scale. Impact of deep-sea trawling on environment. The gears of deep-sea trawling creates huge on the life of marine plants and animals as well as the seafloor by disrupting the sediment column structure, overturning boulders, resuspending sediments and imprinting deep scars on muddy bottoms. Link, http corridor. Context. Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan has said that he was looking forward to enhancing trade ties with Sri Lanka through the multi-billion-dollar China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. About CPEC. The CPEC is the flagship project of the multi-billion-dollar Belt and Road Initiative, a pet project of Chinese President Xi Jinping, aimed at enhancing Beijing's influence around the world through China-funded infrastructure projects. The 3,000 kilometers long China-Pakistan Economic Corridor consists of highways, railways, and pipelines. CPEC eventually aims at linking the city of Gwadar in southwestern Pakistan to China's northwestern region Xinjiang through a vast network of highways and railways. The proposed project will be financed by heavily subsidized loans that will be disbursed to the government of Pakistan by Chinese banks. But, why is India concerned? It passes through POC. CPEC rests on a Chinese plan to secure and shorten its supply lines through Gwadar with an enhanced presence in the Indian Ocean. Hence, it is widely believed that upon CPEC's fruition, an extensive Chinese presence will undermine India's influence in the Indian Ocean. It is also being contended that if CPEC were to successfully transform the Pakistan economy, that could be a red rag for India, which will remain at the receiving end of a wealthier and stronger Pakistan. Besides, India shares a great deal of trust deficit with China and Pakistan and has a history of conflict with both. As a result, even though suggestions to reapproach the project pragmatically have been made, no advocate has overruled the principal strands of contention that continue to mar India's equations with China and Pakistan. Instalinks, Prelim 12. India and Pakistan agrees to observe 2003 ceasefire agreement. Context. India and Pakistan have issued a joint statement to strictly observe the 2003 ceasefire agreement along the line of control. About the 2003 ceasefire agreement. The ceasefire agreement was reached in November 2003, 4 years after the Kargil War. On November 26, 2003, the ceasefire took effect along a stretch of the India-Pakistan frontier. It facilitated the opening of the Srinagar-Muzaffarabad and Poonch-Rawalko routes, paving the way for bus and truck services linking the two Kashmirs for the first time in 6 decades and encouraging cross-lock contacts, exchanges, travel, and trade. The ceasefire also enabled India to complete the construction of a fence near the lock to prevent Pakistan's infiltration of terrorists into Kashmir, a project that it had begun a couple of decades earlier but had to suspend due to Pakistan's artillery fire. Will this ceasefire last? This is not the first time that India and Pakistan have agreed to give peace a chance on the lock to make the lives of civilians living along the line easy. The 2003 ceasefire agreement remains a milestone as it brought peace along the lock until 2006. Between 2003 and 2006, not a single bullet was fired by the Jawans of India and Pakistan. But since 2006, ceasefire violations became the norm with increasing frequency. Recent years have seen an increasing number of ceasefire violations despite an agreement reached in 2018 to adhere to the 2003 ceasefire agreement. What's the concern? This puts a question mark on how long the fresh commitment to ceasefire along the lock can hold, especially with summers approaching. As a matter of annual routine, terror infiltration bids from Pakistan increase as summer begins in the Kashmir Valley. Melting of ice on the high mountains offers Pakistan an opportunity to foment terrorism in the valley. Installing OJT equals GHR 8.1. Japan protests after 2 Chinese Coast Guard ships enter islands in East China Sea. Context. After 2 Chinese Coast Guard ships entered waters off the Senkaku Islands recently, Japan protested against China's intrusion in the uninhabited islets in the East China Sea. Tensions have escalated between the two countries after Beijing enacted a legislation allowing its Coast Guard to use weapons against foreign ships that it views illegally entered its waters. What's the issue? Japan and China are locked in a dispute over the islands in the East China Sea, which Tokyo calls the Senkakus and Beijing the Diaoyu. The islets are administered by Japan, however, Beijing claims the islands as its own. What China says. China's position is that the Diaoyus have been part of Chinese territory since at least 1534. China argues that Japan seized the features by force during the First Sino-Japanese War that ended with the imposition on China of the unequal Treaty of Shimonoseki. It asserts that the Potsdam Declaration that Japan accepted as part of the San Francisco Peace Treaty ending World War II required Tokyo to relinquish control of Taiwan, and that these features are part of Taiwan, which is part of China. But the US took control of them and in 1971 transferred their administration to Japan under the Okinawa Reversion Agreement. Status quo. China had more or less accepted the status quo, provided that Japan did not interfere with its fishing boats outside the 12 nautical mile territorial sea. Then, in 2012, Japan upended the status quo by purchasing the islands from their private Japanese owners, thus nationalizing them. Although the government maintained that this was done to keep them out of the hands of radical nationalists, China felt that Japan was opportunistically consolidating its theft of its territory. Why is the international community worried? This dispute threatens regional and perhaps world peace because the US and its allies could be drawn into a kinetic conflict. In response to pressure from Japan, the US has repeatedly reaffirmed that the features come under the scope of the US-Japan Treaty of Mutual Cooperation and Security. 2. France slams repression of Uyghurs. Context. French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian has denounced what he called the institutionalized repression of China's Uyghur minority. What's the issue? Rights groups believe that at least 1 million Uyghurs and other Turkic-speaking Muslim minorities are incarcerated in camps in the western region of Xinjiang. Mr. Le Drian cited Xinjiang among several examples of considerable regressions for human rights in 2020. Who are Uyghurs? A Muslim minority community concentrated in China's northwestern Xinjiang province. They claim closer ethnic ties to Turkey and other Central Asian countries than to China. Why is China targeting the Uyghurs? Xinjiang is technically an autonomous region within China, its largest region, rich in minerals, and sharing borders with 8 countries, including India, Pakistan, Russia, and Afghanistan. Over the past few decades, as economic prosperity has come to Xinjiang, it has brought with it in large numbers the majority Ha Chinese, who have cornered the better jobs, and left the Uyghurs feeling their livelihoods and identity were under threat. This led to sporadic violence, in 2009 culminating in a riot that killed 200 people, mostly Ha Chinese, in the region's capital Urumqi. And many other violent incidents have taken place since then. Beijing also says Uyghur groups want to establish an independent state and, because of the Uyghurs' cultural ties to their neighbors, leaders fear that elements in places like Pakistan may back a separatist movement in Xinjiang. Therefore, the Chinese policy seems to have been one of treating the entire community as suspect, and launching a systematic project to chip away at every marker of a distinct Uyghur identity. Instalinks 3. Biden revokes Trump's immigrant visa ban. Context. The Biden administration has revoked Donald Trump's suspension of new immigrant visas, which had been in effect since late April 2020. The revoked order had suspended the entry of certain immigrants and non-immigrants into the U.S. ostensibly on grounds of protecting the U.S. labor market in the wake of COVID-19. What's the issue now? Mr. Biden, however, did not revoke a Trump administration pause on H-1B, L and several other work and exchange visitor visa categories that went into effect on June 24, 2020. H-1B visas are predominantly granted to workers in the IT sector, and most of these visas, over 70%, have gone to Indian citizens in recent years. What are H-1B, H-2B, L and other work visas? In order to fill a vacuum of highly skilled low-cost employees in IT and other related domains, the U.S. administration issues a certain number of visas each year, which allows companies from outside the U.S. to send employees to work on client sites. 1. H-1B, person is specialty occupation, to work in a specialty occupation. Requires a higher education degree of its equivalent. 2. L1 visas allows companies to transfer highly skilled workers to U.S. for a period of up to 7 years. 3. H-2B visas allow food and agricultural workers to seek employment in the U.S. 4. J-1 visas, it is for students on work-study summer programs. Instalinks, prelims link. 1. Differences between H-1B, F-1 and M-1 visas. 2. Difference between an NRI and an OKI cardholder. 3. When OKI and PO were merged. 4. The Citizenship Amendment Act, 2019 grants citizenship to 5. Constitutional provision. OJD equals GHR 8ALIO. OJD equals. Context. The International Criminal Court convicted a former commander in the notorious Ugandan rebel group the Lord's Resistance Army of dozens of war crimes and crimes against humanity ranging from multiple murders to forced marriages. About ICC. The International Criminal Court, located in The Hague, is the court of last resort for prosecution of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. It is the first permanent, treaty-based, international court established to help end impunity for the perpetrators of the most serious crimes of concern to the international community. Its founding treaty, the Rome Statute, entered into force on July 1, 2002. Funding. Although the court's expenses are funded primarily by states parties, it also receives voluntary contributions from governments, international organizations, individuals, corporations and other entities. Composition and voting power. Fifth circle. The court's management oversight and legislative body, the Assembly of States Parties, consist of one representative from each state party. Each state party has one vote and, every effort, has to be made to reach decisions by consensus. If consensus cannot be reached, decisions are made by vote. The Assembly is presided over by a president and 2 vice presidents, who are elected by the members to 3-year terms. Criticisms. It does not have the capacity to arrest suspects and depends on member states for their cooperation. Critics of the court argue that there are insufficient checks and balances on the authority of the ICC prosecutor and judges and insufficient protection against politicized prosecutions or other abuses. The ICC has been accused of bias and as being a tool of Western imperialism, only punishing leaders from small, weak states while ignoring crimes committed by richer and more powerful states. ICC cannot mount successful cases without state cooperation is problematic for several reasons. It means that the ICC acts inconsistently in its selection of cases, is prevented from taking on hard cases and loses legitimacy. Instalinks, prelims link. 1. Difference. 2. ICC ruling says it has jurisdiction in Palestinian territories. Context. The International Criminal Court recently ruled that it has jurisdiction over war crimes or atrocities committed in the Palestinian territories, paving the way for a criminal investigation over Israeli actions. Judges said their decision was based on jurisdictional rules in its founding documents and does not imply any attempt to determine statehood or legal borders. What has the ICC said? It ruled that Palestine is a state party to the Rome Statute establishing the ICC. It ruled that Palestine qualifies as the state on the territory in which the conduct in question occurred and that the court's jurisdiction extends to East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and Gaza. Response by Israel. Israel is not a member of the ICC. As a non-member, it cannot appeal the recent ruling, but its Attorney General has argued all along that only a sovereign state can delegate authority to the ICC and that the areas in question were not a Palestinian sovereign state. 3. UN Human Rights Council. Context. The US has announced plans to re-engage with the UN Human Rights Council that former President Donald Trump withdrew from almost 3 years ago. Context. In his address to the United Nations Human Rights Council, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar said, 1. Terrorism continues to be one of the gravest threats to humankind and a crime against humanity, which violates the most fundamental human rights, namely the right to life. 2. Human rights violations and gaps in the implementation of human rights should be addressed in a fair and just manner, with objectivity, non-selectivity and transparency, and with due respect with the principle of non-interference in internal affairs and national sovereignty. Background. India had last month presented an 8-point action plan to deal with the scourge of terrorism, in which India asked the world to crack down on countries sheltering and harboring prescribed terrorists. The action plan also includes cracking the whip on terror financing. About UNHRC. UNHRC was reconstituted from its predecessor organization, the UN Commission on Human Rights, to help overcome the credibility deficit of the previous organization. Headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland. Composition. The UNHRC has 47 members serving at any time, with elections held to fill up seats every year, based on allocations to regions across the world to ensure geographical representation. Each elected member serves for a term of 3 years. Countries are disallowed from occupying a seat for more than 2 consecutive terms. Functions. The UNHRC passes non-binding resolutions on human rights issues through a periodic review of all 193 UN member states called the Universal Periodic Review. It oversees expert investigation of violations in specific countries. Challenges and need for reforms. The human rights record of the member states such as Saudi Arabia, China and Russia in the Council has also not been in line with the aims and mission of the UNHRC, which has led to critics questioning its relevance. Despite the continued participation of several Western countries in the UNHRC, they continue to harbor misgivings on the understanding of human rights. Non-compliance has been a serious issue with respect to the UNHRC's functioning. Non-participation of powerful nations such as the US. Instalinks, prelims link. 4. Why has Colombia granted temporary legal status to Venezuelans? Context. Colombian President Iván Duque recently announced that Venezuelans will have temporary protected status for the next 10 years in what is being called a historic decision. The temporary protection statute is for those Venezuelan migrants who are fleeing dictatorship in their country. The decision covers more than 1.7 million Venezuelans who have fled to Colombia in the last few years. Why are Venezuelans fleeing their country? Venezuela is engulfed in a political crisis with 2 rival politicians claiming to be the country's legitimate leader. Venezuela is currently under the authoritarian rule of President Maduro, who belongs to the United Socialist Party of Venezuela. After completing his first term, Maduro began his second term in January 2019, which is seen by many Venezuelans and members of the international community as illegitimate. The country had also slipped into an economic crisis and entered recession in 2014. After the economic collapse, the crime rate in the country doubled and inflation multiplied in a situation that was made worse by Western sanctions. Role of the US. Maduro has blamed the US sanctions on Venezuela's state oil company and government for the economic problems that the country is currently riddled with, which include hyperinflation, food and medicine shortages, and electricity blackouts. Maduro has also accused the US of trying to rule the country from afar. Background. According to UN estimates, over 90% of the country was living in poverty in April 2019, and an estimated 4.8 million Venezuelans have fled the country for other places in Latin America and for the Caribbean countries as of February 2020. Instalinks, prelims link. 5. International Energy Agency. Context. International Energy Agency has released its India Energy Outlook 2021 report. Key findings. 1. India will make up the biggest share of energy demand growth at 25% over the next 2 decades, as it overtakes the European Union as the world's third biggest energy consumer by 2030. 2. India's energy consumption is expected to nearly double as the nation's gross domestic product expands to an estimated $8.6 trillion by 2040 under its current national policy scenario. 3. India's growing energy needs will make it more reliant on fossil fuel imports as its domestic oil and gas production has been stagnant for years despite government policies to promote petroleum exploration and production and renewable energy. 4. India's oil demand is expected to rise to 8.7 million barrels per day in 2040 from about 5 million barrels of oil per day in 2019, the IEA said, while its refining capacity will reach 6.4 million barrels of oil per day by 2030 and 7.7 million barrels of oil per day by 2040, from 5 million barrels of oil per day. 5. The world's second biggest net oil importer after China currently imports about 76% of its crude oil needs. That reliance on overseas oil is expected to rise to 90% by 2030 and 92% by 2040. 6. Rising oil demand could double India's oil import bill to about $181 billion by 2030 and nearly treble it to $255 billion by 2040 compared with 2019. About IEA. Established in 1974 as per framework of the OECD, IEA is an autonomous intergovernmental organization. Its mission is guided by 4 main areas of focus: energy security, economic development, environmental awareness, and engagement worldwide. Headquarters, Paris, France. Roles and functions. Established in the wake of the 1973-1974 oil crisis, to help its members respond to major oil supply disruptions, a role it continues to fulfill today. IEA's mandate has expanded over time to include tracking and analyzing global key energy trends, promoting sound energy policy, and fostering multinational energy technology cooperation. Composition and eligibility. It has 30 members at present. IEA family also includes 8 association countries. A candidate country must be a member country of the OECD. But all OECD members are not IEA members. To become member, a candidate country must demonstrate that it has 1. Crude oil and/or product reserves equivalent to 90 days of the previous year's net imports, to which the government has immediate access and could be used to address disruptions to global oil supply. 2. A demand restraint program to reduce national oil consumption by up to 10%. 3. Legislation and organization to operate the coordinated emergency response measures on a national basis. 4. Legislation and measures to ensure that all oil companies under its jurisdiction report information upon request. 5. Measures in place to ensure the capability of contributing its share of an IEA collective action. Reports. 1. Global Energy and CO2 Status Report. 2. World Energy Outlook. 3. World Energy Statistics. 4. World Energy Balances. 5. Energy Technology Perspectives. 6. Nigeria's Okonjo-Iweala appointed WTO head. Context. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala has been appointed the new chief of the World Trade Organization, becoming the first woman to ever lead the institution and the first African citizen to take on the role. Roles and functions of Director General of WTO. The Director General of the World Trade Organization is the officer of the World Trade Organization responsible for supervising and directing the organization's administrative operations. The Director General has little power over matters of policy, the role is primarily advisory and managerial. The Director General supervises the WTO Secretariat of about 700 staff and is appointed by WTO members for a term of 4 years. WTO Facts. World Trade Organization, as an institution, was established in 1995. It replaced General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, which was in place since 1946. The WTO officially commenced on 1 January 1995 under the Marrakesh Agreement, signed by 123 nations on 15 April 1994. India has been a member of GATT since 1948, hence it was party to Uruguay Round and a founding member of WTO. While WTO came into existence in 1995, GATT didn't cease to exist. It continues as WTO's umbrella treaty for trade in goods. Structure of WTO. The WTO is headed by the Ministerial Conference, while the daily operations are carried out by 3 administrative bodies. 1. The General Council comprises the representatives of all member countries and acts as the representative of the Ministerial Conference when it comes to daily operations. Its job is to carry out the implementation and monitoring function of the WTO. 2. The Dispute Settlement Body is a part of the General Council and is responsible for settling trade disputes between member states. There is also an appellate body, where member states can appeal any decisions made against them during a dispute settlement. 3. The Trade Policy Review Body is also a part of the General Council and is responsible for ensuring the trade policies of member states are in line with the goals of the WTO. Member countries are required to inform the WTO about changes in their laws and trade policies. Instalinks 7. UN Peacekeepers. Context. India to gift 2 lakh vaccine doses to UN peacekeepers. The announcement was made by External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar during his remarks at a UN Security Council open debate on the implementation of Resolution 2532, passed last year. What is UNSC Resolution 2532? The resolution 1. Demands a general and immediate cessation of hostilities in all situations on its agenda. 2. Calls for all parties engaged in armed conflicts to engage immediately in a durable humanitarian pause for at least 90 consecutive days. 3. Specifically excludes UNSC designated terrorist groups, e.g., the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant. What is peacekeeping? Its significance. United Nations peacekeeping is a joint effort between the Department of Peace Operations and the Department of Operational Support. Every peacekeeping mission is authorized by the Security Council. The financial resources of UN peacekeeping operations are the collective responsibility of UN member states. According to the UN Charter, every member state is legally obligated to pay their respective share for peacekeeping. Composition. UN peacekeepers can include soldiers, police officers, and civilian personnel. Peacekeeping forces are contributed by member states on a voluntary basis. Civilian staff of peace operations are international civil servants, recruited and deployed by the UN Secretariat. UN peacekeeping is guided by 3 basic principles. 1. Consent of the parties. 2. Impartiality. 3. Non-use of force except in self-defense and defense of the mandate. Install 8. How is WHO funded? Context. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced that his country would pay the World Health Organization $200 million by the end of this month. The announcement is significant as former U.S. President Donald Trump had begun the process of withdrawing the U.S. from the WHO, a process stopped by his successor, President Joe Biden. Need for and significance of the move. The US said it believes that multilateralism, the United Nations, the World Health Organization, are essential not just as an effective international COVID-19 health and humanitarian response but also building stronger global health capacity and security for the future. How is the WHO funded? There are 4 kinds of contributions that make up funding for the WHO. These are 1. Assessed contributions are the dues countries pay in order to be a member of the organization. The amount each member state must pay is calculated relative to the country's wealth and population. 2. Voluntary contributions come from member states or from other partners. They can range from flexible to highly earmarked. 3. Core voluntary contributions allow less well-funded activities to benefit from a better flow of resources and ease implementation bottlenecks that arise when immediate financing is lacking. 4. Pandemic influenza preparedness contributions were started in 2011 to improve and strengthen the sharing of influenza viruses with human pandemic potential, and to increase the access of developing countries to vaccines and other pandemic-related supplies. Instalinks, Prelims link. 1. WHO governance. 2. Types of contributions in WHO. 3. Largest contributors. 9. Quad meet. Context. Quad members recently came together for a ministerial meeting. Members discussed about the urgent need to restore the democratically elected government in Myanmar, and the priority of strengthening democratic resilience in the broader region. What is Quad grouping? The Quadrilateral Security Dialogue includes Japan, India, United States and Australia. All 4 nations find a common ground of being the democratic nations and common interests of unhindered maritime trade and security. Genesis. The grouping traces its genesis to 2004 when the 4 countries came together to coordinate relief operations in the aftermath of the tsunami. It then met for the first time in 2007 on the sidelines of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations Summit. The intention was to enhance maritime cooperation between the four nations. Significance of the grouping. Quad is an opportunity for like-minded countries to share notes and collaborate on projects of mutual interest. Members share a vision of an open and free Indo-Pacific. Each is involved in development and economic projects as well as in promoting maritime domain awareness and maritime security. It is one of the many avenues for interaction among India, Australia, Japan and the US and should not be seen in an exclusive context. What are China's views on the Quad? There is a general understanding that the Quad would not take on a military dimension against any country. The strategic community in China, nevertheless, had branded it an emerging Asian NATO. Notably, Japanese PM Shinzo Abe's confluence of two seas address to the Indian Parliament gave a fresh impetus to the Quad concept. This recognized the economic rise of India. Why there is a need for formalization. Despite renewed efforts, the Quad has faced criticism over its lack of formal structure. There have been calls for institutionalization, a formal agreement to transform the group into a formidable anti-China bloc. A lot has changed over the years. Each member state has faced the heat of China's increased aggression. 1. China has grown in might and influence and is keen on picking up fights. 2. After attempting to influence Australia's domestic policies, it slapped punitive tariffs on the country. 3. It is engaged in what has become a routine border confrontation with India. 4. China has flared up territorial disputes with Japan with regards to the Senkaku Islands and is battling a fully fledged trade war with the United States. Instalinks, Prelims Link. 1. Quad composition. 2. When was it first proposed? 3. Country. 10. International Atomic Energy Agency. Context. IAEA chief has said that a 3-month, temporary solution had been found to allow the agency monitoring in Iran to continue, although its level of access will be limited. What's the issue? Iran's conservative-dominated parliament passed a law in December demanding the country suspend some inspections if the US failed to lift sanctions. The law is due to go into effect on Tuesday. Significance of the move. This is an attempt by the US President Joe Biden's administration, European powers and Iran to rescue the 2015 nuclear deal that has been on the brink of collapse since former President Donald Trump withdrew from it. About IAEA. Set up as the world's Atoms for Peace organization in 1957 within the United Nations family. Reports to both the United Nations General Assembly and Security Council. Headquarters in Vienna, Austria. Functions. Works with its member states and multiple partners worldwide to promote the safe, secure and peaceful use of nuclear technologies. Seeks to promote the peaceful use of nuclear energy, and to inhibit its use for any military purpose, including nuclear weapons. Functions. 1. Recommendations to the General Conference on IAEA activities and budget. 2. Responsible for publishing IAEA standards. 3. Responsible for making most of the policy of the IAEA. 4. Appoints the Director General subject to General Conference approval. Programs. Program of Action for Cancer Therapy. Human Health Program. Water Availability Enhancement Project. International Project on Innovative Nuclear Reactors and Fuel Cycles. 11. Human Rights Council election. Context. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has asked UN member states to support the U.S. for its re-election to the United Nations Human Rights Council. Background. Trump regime had taken the U.S. out of the council in 2018, saying it was biased against Israel and had members who were human rights abusers. About elections to the UNHRC. Elections to the Council happen annually, with countries serving for 3 years on a rotational basis, as some of the seats expire on the 31st of December every year. Members shall not be eligible for immediate re-election after 2 consecutive terms. There are 47 seats, equitably distributed according to 5 regional divisions. Countries need a minimum of 97 votes to get elected, and everything happens by secret ballot. As of January 2020, 117 of the 193 UN member states will have served as a member of the HRC. This broad membership not only reflects the UN's diversity, but it gives the Council legitimacy when speaking out on human rights violations in all countries.